The enemies of Super Earth are numerous and ever-growing, relentlessly encroaching upon and disturbing our territories across the galaxy. They are a virus infecting our systems and endangering our citizens. It's for this reason the Helldivers are deployed, to suppress and eradicate our foes like the pests they are. But sometimes pest control isn't enough. Sometimes a stronger message must be sent. To ensure our adversaries understand their meager place in the universal hierarchy, we must establish dominance by any means necessary. For this purpose, Super Earth R&D has approved a devastating new tool for the arsenal of every Helldiver. A heavy boot for the necks of those who dare oppose us. The Jar 5 Dominator. If there is one thing certain about Helldivers 2, it's that every player has strong opinions about which weapons are good and which are trash. How do I know this? Well, I've done 3 weapon reviews so far, and there's always a few peeps that go straight into the comments before even watching the vid. I admire this level of impatience, confidence, and individuality. I share these same attributes each time I visit a steakhouse and skip the menu. The thing is, that's food, and this is a formulated opinion-based review. You can't possibly know how you feel about it before at least tasting it. That was the entire reason why I did the pie experiment on my Slugger vid, which was really nice to see all the comments from all of you. That was cool. Anyway, let's just get it out of the way. If you hate the Dominator, you probably won't enjoy this review. Still here? Okay, well, buckle in. The rest of you I challenge to have an open mind. If you're anything like me, upon first use of the Dominator, I do recall being disappointed by its slow handling and projectile velocity. While it was certainly a formidable weapon in its own right, it has now been juiced up to a state that simply can't be ignored. The latest update has increased the Dominator's power by a whopping 33%, now boasting a damage rating of 300. When factored alongside its 15-round capacity and fire rate of 250, we get a DPR of 4,500, up from 3,000 previously, and a DPS of 1250, up from 833. Again, this is a 33% increase in total damage across the board. This now means the Dominator has a 12% higher DPR than that of the Slugger, and a whopping 375% higher DPS. Because of this, the Dominator no longer exists as a heavier, slower semi-auto version of the Slugger. It is now definitively one of the top 3 medium armor pin weapons in the game. The boost in damage alone is enough to make the subpar handling speed worth it. If it wasn't already, the Dominator is definitely capable of dominating now. When it comes to how the new math translates to actual performance on the field, it's all pretty enticing. As you might expect, trash bugs are obliterated with a single shot, including hunters and their flying brethren. Interestingly enough, both warriors and nursing spewers drop with just a single headshot. This effectively makes half of the bug army one-shot potential for the Dominator. Armored enemies prove easily manageable too, as hive guards can take just 2 shots to the head before they eventually drop. While armored spewers usually take 4, though they're much weaker beneath the neck if you can line it up in time. Stalkers are also a one-shot headshot, if you're precise. Otherwise, they're about 4 to 6 body shots on average, if hit center mass. Brood commanders go down with 2 to the head, and chargers, well, like always, there isn't a primary that penetrates their shell. And the Dominator, like the Slugger and Scorcher, is very effective at shredding their backside with a few well-placed shots, but this requires precision and control, as the Dominator does trade recoil for its immense firepower. If left stranded and unable to use a stratagem weapon, the Dominator can absolutely take down a charger, it just might require kiting around a bit. And while I don't normally feature Titans in my reviews of primary weapons, the Dominator is also notable in how quickly it can shred the underbelly. Once this is done, the Titan can no longer spew bile and is a much easier foe to avoid while using a stratagem to finish it off. The power of the Dominator easily translates over to the bots as well, as it's much of the same story in terms of effectiveness against armor. Light infantry are disassembled with a single shot, while berserkers and devastators can easily be taken out with a single blast to the head. If you can't blow their domes, it's usually about 4 to 5 body shots for berserkers and just a couple more for devastators. The real charm of the Dominator, however, is in its oppressive ability to stagger any enemy short of a Hulk, tank, charger, or Titan. Basically anything that isn't heavy armored, the Dominator staggers considerably. Shooting a charging berserker stops them in their tracks, while hitting a devastator interrupts their aim and effectively immobilizes them if the fire is maintained. This is incredibly useful, specifically for enemies like the rocket devastators who are constantly launching salvos. Having a weapon that essentially stun locks any of the medium armored bots is a huge boon to the success of your mission. But it doesn't stop there. The Dominator's impressive stagger affects even striders too. Hitting any part of a strider will halt its march and stagger it backward a couple of steps. While this is useful on its own in conjunction with a squad member that has a stratagem weapon, the Dominator is also one of the few primaries that can effectively outright destroy striders. While the upper region of the strider is considered heavy armor, everything below the belt is classed as medium. This bodes well for our medium armor pen Dominator, which excels at giving striders free opportunities for hip replacements. By focusing on their leg joints or the base of the frontal shield, you maximize your penetrating power. After just a few shots to these weak points, the strider will crumble and the bot with it. Speaking of crumbling, if you enjoy these vids, support my work by hitting that like button. And if you want to see more, consider subscribing. The next weapon review is likely to be an interesting one. As always, thanks for the support. Alright, so we've addressed the key strengths of the Dominator, but let's review some of its downsides as well. After all, this will not be a weapon that appeals to everyone, simply because of its slower than normal handling speed and precision nature. Sometimes you just want to spray and pray, and not worry too much about where your shots land. I get that. And these reviews are always meant to be objective, but they're also opinion, so disagreement is fully accepted and understood. We're all going to have preferences when it comes to what we take on the battlefield, but I think it's fair to admit that some of us just don't want to step outside of our mold. For instance, I am definitely a shotgun guy. The majority of the reviews I've done so far have been for weapons most closely associated with that weapon type. That means I do have a bias, as does everyone. However, I also enjoy the sickle, or the defender from time to time. The wonderful thing about the weapon sandbox here is that there's a tool for everyone, all with unique natures and stats. So let's finish that thought and be fair about the Dominator's weaknesses. As previously stated, its turn and aim speed is slower than most weapons. This means it's not as snappy when whipping around to gain line of sight on an enemy. Often you'll have to wait just a split second for your crosshair to catch up. Also, the Dominator has considerable recoil. If you're not someone who enjoys the challenge of controlling a powerful firearm with some beefy knockback, then this will likely turn you off. Overall, however, I think the strengths and weaknesses of the newly buffed Dominator balance out beautifully. If it didn't have the slower handling speed or punchy recoil, it would simply be way too good considering what's on offer here with headshot potential, overall damage, armor penetration, and stagger ability. A weapon with this many strengths should require some trade-offs. That's simply good weapon design. Before we conclude, a few final points. The Dominator can effectively take out spore spewers with about 7 to 8 shots. Also, if you're like me, it probably took you longer than it should have to realize the Dominator actually has 2 firing modes. While semi-autos seem standard, I highly advise using the burst mode. As it is with any weapon in Helldivers 2, firing in burst mode can still be used as a semi-auto weapon. The advantage here is that when you need it, it's nice to be able to simply hold the trigger to fire 3 sequential shots, usually in situations of close quarter engagements. Whether it be hunter spam or a charging brood commander, the Dominator when used in burst mode is an effective get-off-me weapon, as 3 quick shots eliminates or staggers just about any foe in the game. And while the Dominator can certainly be effective at range, the nature of its jet-propelled rounds is a curious one. You'd think inherent in the name that the speed of the projectile would be faster than normal, but instead we have a shorter than average travel speed here. That often means you'll need to lead your shots at any distance above 40 or 50 meters. If a target is stationary, this isn't an issue, but one slight movement post-shot can be enough to cause a miss. This is an interesting mechanic for a tool that's description would make you assume otherwise, but regardless, we're clearly dealing with a heavy, slow-moving round. For this reason, I find the Dominator excels in close to medium-range engagements, where accuracy is less of a concern. As long as you're close enough to constantly line up your shots, very little will endure the full strength of this weapon. So let's bring it home. The Dominator is a raging bull, a weapon with fierce power and stagger ability that can indeed be difficult to control. It lacks the turn speed of most primaries, and the projectile travels slower than something like a slugger or diligence. These trade-offs balance out a weapon that, in the right hands, can cause fear in the hearts of your foes. While the Dominator, like the slugger, isn't well suited for large waves of little guys, it absolutely excels at medium-sized enemies like warriors, spewers, berserkers, and basically anything with a head. I advise bringing along a stalwart, rover, or Gatling sentry, all various flavors of crowd control, if you're not confident in the Dominator dealing with the waves. For all other encounters, it will excel if you're steady and precise, and understand its strengths and utility. Oftentimes, it is better suited purely as an armor-penetrating weapon, rather than a primary. Still, in the right hands, it sits alongside the Slugger and Scorcher as one of the more effective tools in the game for medium-armored foes. Ultimately, the Dominator gets a liberty-loving stamp of approval. While it has weaknesses, the strengths more than make up for it, and if you know how to use it, it can absolutely excel. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. And make sure you're back here next week for my next weapon review. It'll be the first time a weapon does not get a liberty-loving stamp of approval. It's sure to be an interesting one. Until next time, dominate the battlefield, soldiers, for Super Earth.